because we're on Zoom, it's fantastic that we can actually get speakers from all over the world. And we are really lucky tonight to have Marta from Warsaw. I think that's right, yes, and Jan from London. So I'm going to put Marta, who's going to speak first, and then Jan, and there will be time then for questions, but I think we'll probably take them all together at the end of the two speakers, who are going to both speak for about 10 minutes. And then there will be plenty of time to people to ask questions, say what they think. If you need to use Polish, that's fine. I'm sure Marta will be able to work out what you're saying, though I definitely won't. So, but that's fine if you want to ask a question. Okay, I'm going to start off with Marta, and then we'll take it from there. So over to you, Marta.
Hi, thank you so much for your invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, like, have you seen the video? Like, I think the video speaks for itself, yes. And like the thousands of people onto the streets, that's amazing. But it's not only the story of Poland. Like this story of systematic abuse of women's rights and basically making women body subordinate to the market economy, like this happening all over the world. And it's important to see that it starts, like, you know, with those organizations like which call themselves pro-life organizations, which are like totally anti-women health, anti-women choice, and women rights, basically. And then it slowly moves to total ban on abortion, and and this is what happened in Poland. Yes, like the verdict of the Constitutional Tribunal from October 2022, it was actually like the last straw that breaks the camel's back. Yes, it wasn't because even previously the abortion was basically banned. Like there was like less than 1,000 cases of abortion performed each year, so it almost a ban, actually. And yeah, it was a great like, it was the moment when people realized that it's something wrong is happening. Like the approach of the government toward people, like total lack of respect. So yeah, we took onto the streets, and those demonstrations, those protests, actually changed us so much as a society, and this experience of extreme solidarity among the protesters. Like our motto, yeah, is like you'll never walk alone again. Yes, like the total, like absolute solidarity, and this is so much contrary to what we experience from the side of the state apparat of power, like the police, for example. But the support to this protest, like 70% of the society supports the women's strike, our movement, and what is even more amazing is the fact that so many young people take actively part in these demonstrations. It's like 30%. So it is also, it's something that gives me so much hope, because I see people like 13, 14 years old, of course, like onto the streets. Like there are many groups of people, not only young people, but like we see people from all the backgrounds, all age. It's also amazing. But what gives me so much hope is that I see basically young teenagers, and I think the experience of those protests will be something that will shape them politically, because because they experience so much brutality from the police. Like, of course, it is like one girl had her arm broken in like so severely that she had to have like 2 surgeries, yes, by the policeman, and like tear gas spraying the demonstrators. It's like kind of normality during those demonstrations. So also arresting like really young people. There was the case where like 14 years old boy was arrested for sharing the post on Facebook. Yes, and this is something that will stay with these people, like the experience of the abuse and experience of the solidarity from the rest of, like, from the other protesters, and yeah, maybe someday it will be the seed of the new revolution. Yes. um, um, Also, what I think these protests change is how we see other people from other cities, from other towns and villages, because like I think neoliberal propaganda in our country, but I think it's the really international thing. Like all over the world, the neoliberal propaganda say basically the same, that people from big cities are like some different category, yeah, of people, and like those from villages are kind of worse, and it's such a bullshit. But I think those protests are the first step for many young people who believed in this kind of bullshit, to see, no, we are all the same. We have like common interest and common fight against our oppressors, against the capitalism, against the patriarchy, because the protests are basically organized by the activists, and activists from many different places, so all over the Poland, and people from countryside cooperate with people from big cities, like from different economical background and things like that, and they start to see that they are actually the member of the same class, yes, and their power is in being together, in being united, and putting constant pressure on the government and on the ruling party. This this also resulted in drastical drop in the trust toward the police, the church, and the ruling party. It's like the drop by 30%. So it shows how all the society experienced these protests, and how it also changed the attitude of all the society towards the ruling party and the government. How can we win? It also the question I very often ask myself, to myself. And I think it's very important to keep protesting, like no break, to put the government in constant discomfort by taking to the streets, by blockades, because it's already a great achievement that we managed to survive as the movement almost 2 months, and I hope we will last till spring, and then we will unite with other movements. Maybe the protests and demonstration and strikes of the people who suffers because of the COVID crisis. Yes, like the medics, the healthcare workers, or other groups, and we all together with the very strong demands start fighting against the government. But we'll see. But I think it is really the possible to have this change, liberalization of the abortion law, because it's not the fight for going back to the status quo and having very limited right to the abortion, but to full legalization. Yeah, and changing and like overthrowing this government. Yes. The last remark, as the conclusion remark, I wanted to say that those protests also for me were very important. I see like people around me really changed. My friends who were like very much neoliberals, were very much like conservatives even, they really start to see to see the role of the strikes, the role of the revolution, the role of the street movement, and that's something amazing. Like I couldn't ever I could have never expected that before. And after this months of lockdown, where everything seems like to have little sense, or well, it was very difficult, those street movement gave us so much hope, and it felt almost like the revolution. It felt like the revolution is here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Marta. If you can see everyone applauding on the screen. Okay, thank you so much. Right, we're going to move straight on to Jan, and then after that we will have questions and things that anything people want to talk about or debate. So without further ado, I'm going to give you over to Jan. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that, Marta, because I can completely understand. It must have felt like the revolution, because it looked like the revolution, and the wonderful reports that we had in Socialist Worker each week about your protests, I know really moved so many comrades, that we could sense that women were on the march and were going to change their lives for the better. So recently, following the election of the Law and Order Party in Poland. So it's an inspiration, undoubtedly, what's happened in Poland. Very important for us here. Before I I just want to start really my bit by making a couple of comments about why this is so important. Because the question about control over our fertility is absolutely central to the liberation of women. If we cannot control our bodies, we will not be able to participate in the world as equals with men, with the rest of our comrades. So it's absolutely central. And I think it's worth people realizing throughout all of human history, women have attempted to control the number of children that they have. The earliest anthropological records of this are as far back as 1850, when archaeologists found the utensils and materials that women used in those days, honey, acacia leaves, to try and bring about an abortion. Inuit Indians used, if you can believe it, the tusks of walruses. In ancient Egypt, women inserted copper into their vaginas. And the reason why the coat hangers, the wire coat hangers are often a symbol internationally when women protest for the right to control their fertility, is that in places like Britain and across the rest of the world, prior to us having things like the 1967 Abortion Act, that's often what women had to resort to. So that barbarism will continue while these people try and take away our rights, and it's an outrage. I also want to make it clear it's a class issue. I'm sure Marta will agree with me. If you've got money in Poland, the law doesn't make any difference. You'll be able to pay to go abroad to visit families. In Britain, you could go and get an abortion in Harley Street before it was illegal if you had the money. So it's about a class issue for our class, that we want the same rights that bourgeois women can often pay for. And again, I'm sure Marta will have some stories about this. The hypocrisy of those people who call themselves pro-lifers. In America, all the research shows these people are funded and backed by the evangelical church. The evangelical church that calls for longer sentences for people, that supports the executions that take place on an unprecedented scale in America. Most of them carry guns. They're part of the gun lobby. They do nothing, absolutely nothing, despite the promises to ever support the most vulnerable women in society. So for that reason, this is one of the central issues for revolutionary socialists, but particularly in this period, because Marta said that this is a phenomenon across the world, and where we've seen the rise that Bolsonaro did when he came to power was that he closed the Department of Human Rights and replaced it with a family values department. He wants to see a Brazil without any abortion. If you look to Orban in Hungary, again, one of the first things he did was close a large faculty in one of the big universities of women's studies. And now in Hungarian universities, if anyone talks about women's liberation or tries to set up seminars to look at the position of women, the university risks losing its funding. So the far right always have all the gains of 1960s that we fought for and won, like LGBT plus liberation, like access to abortion, like equal pay and equality for women. They've got those things in their sight because they have very conservative notions of the family. And that's how they've been able to work in conjunction with the Catholic Church in Poland and across the rest of Eastern Europe and the world, and why they're working with the evangelical church. So when we say not the church, not the state, we absolutely mean that it's women who have to make this decision, not what lots of people will describe as organizations mostly composed of men in frocks. But I think it is worth, Marta's given a lovely thing about Poland, it is worth looking at our side, a bit nearer her, well, not really, America in particular, to see what's gone on there, because I think that may be the next place where there's a big flash, conflict over this. I mean, Trump, the self-proclaimed pussy puller, as I say, is backed enormously by the evangelical church. He's been very dependent. Nobody believes that Trump is really anti-abortion, but he's pushed this policy for the 4 years that he's been in power. And he's spent 4 years ensuring that the Supreme Court in America is now stuffed full of anti-abortionist, so-called pro-life people. They're determined in America. I mean, in some states in America, it is still absolutely, in Alabama, you cannot have an abortion under any grounds, I understand, in Alabama. They've been pushing the 4 years that Trump's been in power to try to get the landmark decision of 1973, the Roe versus Wade, where the courts, the Supreme Court ruled that women had the right to choose without excessive interference, legal interference from the courts, where they gave some, they gave some power to women in this decision. in these decisions, and Trump and the Republican Party are still pushing this on the ground. They've got the Supreme Court stuffed on their side, and I think they will try in the next couple of years, despite Biden's victory, they will try and reduce access to women to this. And we have to understand also that, you know, Trump during his reign did manage as well to implement the global gag, which means that no foreign fund, no international support funds, international money from America goes to any third world organization that either promotes or gives women advice about abortion or advocates contraception. What an obscenity that you have somebody like Trump and the evangelical church who decide that in some of the poorest countries of the world, the communities will not get funding for food and the resources they need if the women in those communities are getting access to abortion. It's an absolute disgrace. And we should note, although we're not facing an imminent problem here in Britain immediately, there are still plenty of anti-abortionists crowded into Boris Johnson's cabinet, and there's always discussion going on around amongst these people about how they can start to chip away. They always look at time scales, but what they really want to oppose is abortion under any conditions. There is a little grouping at the moment that's talking to Tory MPs to try and bring a private member's bill that will make it more difficult when women have amniocentesis tests. If they test positive that their child has Downs, that it'll be more difficult for them to get that termination. So we need to be, which is why celebrating what happens in Poland and celebrating, as we all did, the repeal in Ireland is so important. And really, I want to just come to a conclusion on that, because everything that has happened in Poland really reminds me, I watched very closely the Irish repeal because I have a massive matriarchal extended family in Ireland, and the fantastic way that the Irish women and the Polish women took on the might of the church and the Catholic Church and the state. The fact, so many similarities, the fact that it was mainly led by women, but there were loads of men behind. The fact that it was mainly led by young women pulling out their mums, pulling out their grannies onto the street. What we've seen is an absolute, it's like, we've let the lid off the volcano and all the years of repression, because, there is no laws on men's bodies, only on women's. And the years and years of that has been just amazing to see. But I think it's also worth us saying, and I think what Marta said, that people, start on the question of abortion, and by the end of those protests are attacking the right wing and the fascists in particular, but also that really across the world, whether you're looking at sexual violence in India, whether you're looking at, let's not forget Argentina just this week have won a massive victory on in the courts over the question of abortion, or whether you're looking at the inauguration of Trump himself, where women's rights are threatened, women come out and they protest and they bring out their communities to do it. So I think we ought to be very, very inspired and very hopeful, and understand that women's lives have changed so much since those of our grandmothers and our grandmothers, that we are a genie that they are not going to be able to put back into the box without an enormous fight. So thank you, Marta, for being part of that. And thank you to the Irish women and the Argentinian women and all those women across the world who in terrible circumstances are standing up to individual male violence, but also to the state oppression that we see.
Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I really thank you for all the solidarity and those protests, like also supporting, yes, the solidarity protest in UK, like that's amazing. In many countries, and yes, I'm so much grateful, and I think like all my sisters here are also very, very thankful. And I think both question about like some low rates of supporting people, Polish community in UK, of people supporting this protest, and like what Krzysztof said about that some of them are right wing. And the question of the trade unions, they relate somehow, because I see there is still very the awareness of the political situation of working class in Poland from the working class is quite low. I think they still lack this this acknowledging of their own situation and who is their real oppressor. So it is also, as I think Marx said that, yes, that this issue of the working class enemies, like the migrants and things like that, is something raised by the right wing, yes, and by capitalists, but to weaken the power of the working class. And the trade unions, it's the most difficult thing for us in Poland, because in other countries, yes, like in UK, in US, in Argentina, actually who leads those protests are trade unions. And here trade unions, were actually took over by the working party, by the ruling party, and by the government. So the Solidarity is such a great union, yes, like famous so much from the protecting of the workers and workers movement. It's now the completely under the control of the party, of the Law and Justice Party, and that's so sad, because of course there are organizations like our organization, like Workers' Democracy, but it's not the same as workers' unions. Yes, it's that's, yeah. I have, like, you know, I'm so sad about it, but maybe it will change soon, because people start, because of the pandemic and the crisis, people start to see the problem, and that they have to organize in their working place. So I hope. And thank you very much, Krzysztof. You made my job a little bit easier to answering the question, because yes. Okay, so yeah, like Solidarność, like at this point, not even fight for workers' rights. Like when we had teachers strike, they were like completely passive, because and it's not the case with all the members, but the board, yes, of this union is actually completely passive. And yeah, and regarding the question on far right and how this demonstration had impact on far right, like less, like their protests, their demonstration on 11 of November, like it is our the celebration in Poland of like Independence Day. They always have their march, it was so much less people than before, than in previous years, but they became more and more extreme. This year they put on fire some flat, some apartment, just randomly because they're throwing their flowers. Like not exactly randomly, because the condemnation, higher condemnation, there was the placard, there was the motto, the picture supporting women's strike. So the hate to women, to this women movement, is so much extreme by the far right. Yes. And yeah, the question on Catholic Church, it is really similar to Ireland, and it is our also great inspiration. So like not Catholic Church, but the movement, yes, and how it all how effectively we fight all the bigotry and like all and the propaganda of Catholic Church regarding women's body. It is very similar indeed to Ireland, and also all the crimes of Catholic Church in Poland are revealed, similarly as it was in Ireland. Yes, with this pedophilia and things like that. So it also the trigger in Poland to protest against the government and the church. Yes, regarding disability, I think it is very very difficult, but to see that pro-life so-called organizations are not pro-life of disabled people. It's like we had like few years ago the picket of parents of disabled children in the parliament, and the way the government show all the disrespect and all the hate to those people who just wanted to have the resources to to yes, exactly. So it really shows the nature of all this pro-life propaganda. And also, like, I think women should have right to decide. Yes, it's pro-choice, so but it's always the choice of women, and like not only regarding disabled children, but any, like, okay, not children, fetus, like let's be clear, like it's not children yet, yes, but it's always choice of women, and that's important to see. And these cases of abortion of disabled children are also okay. They have some humanitarian value, maybe, but on the other hand, it's also very capitalistic, yes, because the abortion which is allowed is the abortion of those who are unproductive. Let's put it in this word. So it is also that our right to abortion at this point is also dictated by the interest of capitalists. Even if in countries where there are cases where abortion is allowed and it's not banned, yes, it's always women body being subordinate to the interest of capitalists. And yes, at this point, it has been always related to this issue. Yes, thank you.
Okay, right. Jan, over to you to sum up. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Sorry.
Yes.
There we are. I've unmuted myself. That's
Oh,
fine.
great. Sorry, Jan. Yeah, okay.
All right, no worries. I want to come back on a couple of things. I mean, firstly, I think the point that Catherine raised, she made two points that are really important. One, that actually 1 in 3 women at some point in their adult life will have a termination. That's a huge number. And we ought to be talking out about that. It oughtn't be something that is a stigma. One of the things that the Abortion Rights Campaign organised, which was fantastic a couple of years ago, or more than a couple, probably about 10 years ago, when there was an attack, there was going to be a private members bill. We had an enormous meeting in central London in one of the big halls of women speaking out about under what circumstances they had had terminations. And it ranged from getting pregnant at the pony club outing to women who'd been raped by relatives, and loads of us there who actually had just made a decision that that was not the right time for us. We need that, but you're right. While they close off sex education in schools, I can't remember who raised it, this will be one of the victims of that we won't be able to talk openly about those things. On the question of abortion, I mean, as a revolutionary socialist, we fight for a different sort of world. We fight for the liberation of the elderly, the liberation of small children. We want to see everyone lead a full and meaningful life, but we have to recognise at the present time, for a woman for women to have children who are disabled is an enormous change, an absolutely massive change on their lives. And many women decide that for all sorts of economic, social, material reasons, they cannot fulfill that responsibility. And we say they have a right. You take the choice in the context of where you are at that moment at time, and you have a right to do that in the same way as any of us do. But also for disabled women, actually in Abortion Rights Campaign, there's an active disabled women's group, but it's active over exactly the opposite, you know, that they are pushed into having terminations when they don't want to. And we support the right of disabled women and non-disabled women, all women, to make the choice in their context, in their medical condition, etc. And we oppose them being pushed to do something that they can't do or don't feel they can't do because of the restrictions of society. I also, the point Raleigh raised, I think dovetails into what Gail talked about, which I think is very important. You're right, Raleigh. They are total hypocrites. They don't give a damn about children. It's not them. It's black who are fighting for food to put into children's stomachs at the present time. It's black football players who are doing it. They don't do anything. But why do they want women to not have control over their fertility or a choice when it comes to fertility? Because they believe in the bourgeois structure of the family, you know, a hierarchical organization, the man at the top, it's supposed to be happy, it's supposed to be harmonious. They fought for this. There's a plethora of legislation, rules, regulations governing the setting married life throughout the late 18th and the 19th century. And they shored up marriage and family life and made it difficult for people to separate from that in particular, because they want to see that structure imposed on people, because it kind of is supposed to mirror the nature of society. And also, I think Gail's right, because so much unpaid labour goes on in the home as the aid. That's the place where we're socialised to accept the rules and regulations of society, to fit in, to go to work, to come home, to repair, to go back to work again. So it's all about the capitalist system and the exploitation. And the ruling class, elements of the ruling class, and particularly the far right, see that as the stabilising force. And that's why they want us in it. I think rather than sort of grand ideas about us having 10 children, but they want to see women as mothers. They think that's our most important role, and they want to remind us about that as often as they can. The last point I will finish on, Christoph's one, I think is really interesting. The Catholic churches in Britain are packed. They wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the Polish community. Immigrants often rely on churches, which I think will credit to the women who've come out and protest, because I'll tell you what, they'll have a bloody hard time if they go to Mass on Sunday, if they've been seen out in the streets. But I will just say this, you know, when we got our legislation, a progressive legislation, it was progressive in 1967, there was a series of assaults on the Act, people trying to remove particularly the timescales. I mean, we, as SWP members, as revolutionaries, I'm going to tell you a story. We made our male members go into totally dominated male trade union branches and argue that abortion was a class issue. I can remember I was in East London, I was a young student at the time, but I can remember two comrades, Stephen Gordon, in Ford's Dagenham, a totally male workforce, having to go into the union branch and argue with the men to support a woman's right to choose. Now, we did that all over the country, Crystal, and we now have a situation where every major trade union supports a woman's right to choose. Lots of people said, I'll tell you, I can remember the men when I was giving out leaflets at the factory going, oh, lovely, lovely, it's got nothing to do with me. It's all about women's bits and pieces. But now every major trade union, by and large, has a position. That's what revolutionaries do. We take it, the difficult questions, we take them into the movement and give them ownership. And that meant that in 1983, when Corrie, a Tory, tried to again attack the 1967 Act, we had a demonstration in London, a huge demonstration, I can't remember the figures, that was led by Len Murray, who was then the leader of the TUC and led by the Trade Union Congress banner. That, I think, actually, it hasn't happened in Ireland, and I think they'll find that as our enemies come back and realign and try and attack, that's the only way you can do it. I'm sure for our comrades in Poland, that's important as well. We'll have to protect the victories we get, and it's only our class who's really capable of doing that. So if you want to be part of that, and I would say to people who are not members, come and join us. We need you and you need us. Thank you.
Thank you.